I am now pleased to say that I have seen every Howling movie. It is finally over. I can move on. All that remains to do now is to review the final one. I'm going to have a little celebratory howl. Ow! Hi guys, so in 2011 Howling Reborn was released, and Reborn is apt because this was the first Howling movie for 16 years. It has nothing to do with Clive Turner's film Howling New Moon Rising. I'm very glad about that. I did not want a sequel to the works of Clive Turner, but the trouble is this film has nothing to do with any Howling film actually. It's very much a standalone feature. All it does is take the Howling name and then does its own thing after that. And it was directed by a guy called Joe Nimziki. You might remember him from the Carly Alexander music video Wonderful and the Outer Limits episode Stream of Consciousness, one of my personal favourites. What I'm trying to say in a very roundabout way is that this film was Joe Nimziki's only one in the director's chair. So for the second Howling film in a row, we get a director for whom their only movie ever was their Howling movie. They didn't really go for the highest caliber of directors in this series, did they? So in terms of story, we've got a guy called Will, and going by his glasses and his moppish black hair, he's sort of a combination of Harry Potter and Billy Loomis from Scream, but not the cool version of Billy Loomis. I mean the dorky looking one from the Stab movies. Now Will is, I presume, in his final year of high school. He's a little bit nerdy. He doesn't really socialise much. He wants a girl, but he doesn't have the confidence to talk to them. But as luck would have it, one day he's stood in the corridor pulling things out of his locker, and the hot girl of the year just comes along and just randomly starts flirting with him at his locker, and they start a romance. So if anybody's watching this who's still at high school and you're a little bit depressed by the fact that you've not had a romance yet, just hang out by the locker. Eventually the hot girl will come along and it will all work out. So this girl, Eliana, she takes Will to a nightclub. They don't buy a drink when they're there, and it's one of these magical nightclubs where the music is turned right down so you can have a conversation in the middle of the dance floor, and the romance is really starting to develop at this point. And by the halfway stage of the film, they are completely in love with each other, but Will is secretly a werewolf, and his mother, who is also a werewolf, she abandoned Will at birth. She's now back on the scene with her pack of other werewolves, and she wants to get Will into the pack and away from Eliana. So we've got a little bit of a battle going on in this film, and Will is going to have to decide, does he choose the love of Eliana or the family loyalty of the werewolf pack? It's not a hard decision because his mum is an absolute bitch and all of her goons are complete arseholes. So spoiler alert, he does choose Eliana, but will the pack allow them to have their thing, or will they kill them both? So that's the story. The story in this doesn't make the film bad on its own, but the execution of it certainly does. I mean, it got to the point in this film where I just started writing down every little bad thing about it, and the list got so long that I thought to myself, I'm not going to be able to talk about all of these things in my review. I'm going to have to pick and choose. But I think the thing that is the worst thing about Howling Reborn is that it's clearly a Twilight knockoff. This film came out in 2011. There was this whole fad around about that time of TV shows and movies that were trying to be the same as Twilight, you know, things like the Vampire Diaries and stuff. But I'm just not into that kind of subgenre, if you can call it that. It's not that I'm not into romances. It's just that, firstly, I've never really seen the attraction in mixing romance with vampires and werewolves. And secondly, the romance in this particular film is just extremely badly executed. Like, the dialogue between Will and Eliana is so unnatural. I think we have to get to roughly the halfway point of the runtime before they have anything resembling a normal conversation, but by then it's just way too late. But all the way through this, I just could not get it out of my head that I was watching some really bad Twilight knockoff. Once upon a time, when I was on my honeymoon, 2010, I had to sit through Twilight 3 Eclipse in the cinema. I did that just to please my wife, you know, but God, that was a painful experience. I was reminded of that when I was watching this film. They could have called this film Howling, The Roar of Twilight, or something like that. The only good thing in this movie is the acting, which is generally passable. It's okay. I actually recognise some of the people in this. So the woman who plays the mother is Ivana Milicevic, something like that. I think she's a Serbian actress, or Bosnian maybe. I've seen her in a few things and she's always good. The woman who plays Eliana, meanwhile, Lindsey Shaw, I've seen her in a TV show, I'm sure I have. The guy, Landon Liboiron, bit of a weird name. I've not seen him in anything, but his acting seems pretty good for this film. At the end of the day, they're just playing what's on the page. We can't blame the actors for this mess, but the characters, just dreadful. The villains, all of them, really, really one-dimensional. This is essentially all they're about. We're werewolves and we're going to get you because we're evil and it's just in our nature to get people, so here we come. That's all they're about. There's nothing else to them but that. Eliana spends at least the first half of the film just in a weird kind of flirty poise. She's got this flirty face, and that's all she does for the entire first half. They might as well have called the character Flirty McFlirtison, but it just becomes tiresome after a while. As for Will, he has no ambitions in the world other than to get with a girl. At no point is it mentioned what he's doing at school or what he aims to be afterwards, what he's shooting towards in life. He just wants to get with a girl. That's it, seemingly. And together, the romance of these two is not very well handled. There's one scene where they're texting each other back and forth across the classroom. The camera goes from one phone to the other, and they'll sort of glance at each other as well. But it's like, why don't we have the characters actually talking? That's quite a novel idea. Why don't we do that? I mean, I get that a lot of romances in the modern world do begin with a lot of texting and stuff while you're getting to know someone, but this is a movie. Have the characters talking. There's so many stereotypes in this as well. Like, there's the convenient best friend who just happens to be a film student, who just happens to be writing a lot of screenplays to do with werewolves, which is very handy because it means that Will can go to him for werewolf advice and for tips on how to deal with werewolves and for tips on how to deal with becoming a werewolf. You know, it's all very convenient. And there's also the angry school bully who just hates Will for no reason. I get why a bully might pick on a nerdy guy like Will just for a cheap laugh, but this bully seems extremely angry to Will, to the point where I just don't get where all this anger is coming from. This bully is actually dating Eliana at the start of this film, so he should therefore be happy. But no, it's like he's got this hot girl on his arm, but he's still just, he just hates life. He's like, oh, I've got this really hot girl, but my life sucks, so I'm going to beat on that kid down there. But I just don't get where the anger comes from. There's a scene where the bully just starts laying into Will, starts actually punching him and stuff, and then Will fights back because he summons his inner werewolf, but he's not transformed. He's able to tap into his strength without transforming. I didn't know that werewolves could do that. I thought that you had to transform before you get the strength, but not in this movie. So I have to ask the question, what's the point in turning into the werewolf? If you've got your strength as a human, why not just stay a human? Why turn into this ugly, hairy thing just to have the same strength? It's just a bit weird. But anyway, Will turns the tables on the bully, knocks him out in the toilets, then he runs off. The bully wakes up, and he's so wound up at this point, he pulls a gun out the back of his pants. This is the middle of the school. It's not some cheap little pistol or something, and it looks like a Glock or something. It looks like an expensive handgun, the sort of gun that a terrorist from Die Hard might have as his sidearm, and he's just wandering around the school carrying this. So he chases Will up some stairs. There's no kids around. The school is just vacant all of a sudden for this scene, and it just seems really weird in the middle of the daytime having this kid running around with a Glock. But then, excuse me, Will turns the tables and pushes the bully off the top of these stairs. So he falls 4 stories and goes splat. A horrible mess. But then we cut to the following day, and it's like this never happened. The school is just carrying on as normal. Will seems really chipper. He's not affected by the fact that he's just killed somebody for the first time. That whole mess with the dead body, I presume it's just vanished. Like, the body's gone, all the forensic evidence is gone. Nobody's noticed that one of the kids is missing. It's just really weird. Like, we pretend that that whole series of events just never happened. There's a weird moment in this, which I think is a piss take of the first Howling movie, but I'm not sure. So one character says to the other, "I've not seen many werewolf movies," and the other person then replies, "Well, I don't blame you, they're full of middle-aged people," or something like that. I might not have got the exact sentence exactly right, but personally, I've never associated werewolf movies with middle-aged people, so I kind of wonder if this is a reference to the first Howling movie, where the two main characters are almost middle-aged. I think the main couple in that film are sort of 40-ish or touching 40. But if I'm right, then this whole joke, if you can call it that, is a little bit off, because Howling Reborn is not fit to even clean the bootlaces of the first Howling movies. It's just a bizarre exchange of dialogue. Some funnier moments of dialogue in the film I just can't let pass without reading them out. So this particular perler is from Will. "Women are like history lessons. Fascinating, but also boring." This one's from Eliana. "There are two types of people in this world, Will. Those who take and those who are taken." Again, I might be paraphrasing a little bit there, because I wrote these lines down in shorthand, but whatever the exact sentences are, very cringeworthy. Speaking of cringe, there's a scene in a library in this film where Will is looking at some books, and then Eliana just pops up out of nowhere by moving some books aside and peering through a hole in the bookshelf. How many times have we seen this in movies or TV shows now? It's such a cliche. People need to really stop doing it. What makes this scene even worse is that the two characters end up on the floor in this scene, getting down and dirty, and there's even a bit of bondage with a belt, and I'm just thinking, it's the school library, come on. I'm sure that if you look around, there's probably a no petting sign somewhere if it's a library of some repute, but I mean, come on, not the floor of the library. This film at times, it's very much a teen fantasy rather than an actual story, you know, a proper believable story, even in the context of werewolves. You know, it's too much. There's another scene where Will and Eliana are just sat around doing God knows what, and some music comes on, and it's the same song that's in the original Scream movie. So there's a scene where Billy Loomis climbs through the window of Sidney Prescott. It's right at the start of the original, and there's an acoustic song that plays when Billy is doing this. They've taken that song and put it in this movie. They probably thought, "Ooh, let's steal that song. I bet no one notices, and we'll get a whole Billy and Sidney vibe going on." The end of the film is no better than anything that's come before it. In fact, I was a little bit offended by the final scene. It's off. It really is. So Will and Eliana, having just killed the werewolves, they're walking along arm in arm, a bit dirtied from all the fighting, but they're still pretty happy with their lot, you know. And they just happen to walk past the graduation ceremony that's happening at the school. They've missed this because they were busy, you know, defending themselves from werewolves, which is fair enough. But they walk past this ceremony, and the headmaster or somebody, he looks at them and says something disparaging or just gives them a funny look. And Will takes offence at this, and he says back something like, "Sir, you know nothing." And he does it in a really smug sort of way, like, "I've got a girlfriend now, I've seen the werewolf underworld, and not many other people have. I've got it all going on now, I know everything, I'm the man about town, I've got it all sussed," you know. And I'm just thinking, oh, okay, Will. I mean, this teacher, he must be like 50 or something, he's not an arsehole. He's just some random normal teacher, but he's probably got like so much more life experience than this teenager. And the whole scene, probably to a teenager watching this film, you wouldn't notice it being off, but to me it was kind of like, yeah, this is just a little bit cringy. really, as a finale. There's a song that plays either on the credits or close to when the credits happen, and it's probably my favourite moment in the film, because I kid you not, the first line of dialogue in this particular song is, "The book of love is long and boring," and I don't think the film is self-aware that this line is there, because it just sums up the movie so well for me. Normally at this point in the review I would show you a copy of the version that I own for the film that I'm talking about, but suffice to say I do not own a copy of this garbage. So let's go straight to the bag of terror and find out what sort of score I'm going to give this movie. One bloody axe, and I think I'm being very generous with that. So there we have it, the final Howling movie. I have now completed all my reviews for this franchise. I will do one more video soon where I will rank all of the movies, but in terms of individual film reviews, we are now done and I can move on to something else. It's been quite the journey, but yeah, it's over. It's time to move on. So thank you for joining me, and I'll be back to do something else very soon. Until next time, ow!